So we're hanging out and talking about your Sphere 2 map.
Yeah, specifically level 23.
Yeah, what's the problem? What'd you do?
It's what I haven't done. I'm not quite sure where to go with it. I remember when you wrote this back in, well, August. I read through it all the time. I thought I understood it. And then when I got to it, so many months later and looked at it, I found that I no longer knew exactly where to go with it or where to start. And the first part of it said, where it says understanding the mountain is apt because I'm standing there looking at the mountain. I'm not sure where the path is.
Okay.
So I thought if I was able to kind of walk back through how you built it and what you were coming up with, and then try and draw from that how it connects to the next levels where I'm actually taking all the pictures, that would help.
Okay. So you're already at this level and you've just kind of been hanging out.
Yeah.
Trying to figure it out. Okay, so let me refresh a little bit. Understanding the mountain. The magnitude of the mountain is best appreciated not by those who reside on the mountain itself, but by those who dwell in the valley. Meaning that you can't see how tall the mountain is while you're on it. Some places might not even seem an incline as you scale it. In the opposite, those who are in the valley can often be intimidated and find impossible the concept that they might scale to the peak of such a great monument. In short perspective often becomes our truth. Your sole purpose for the rest of Sphere 2 is to challenge your perspectives, both your own and those who come into contact with your artistry. I'd like you to consider your artistic journey a pilgrimage of the soul. I'm really good at this. A strengthening of spirit, an expansion of consciousness, and an increase of the mind's endurance. Everest is the tallest mountain in the world. You begin at the base. From there are 7 additional camps or milestones that are steps along the path. Let's metaphor this for life and assume that you must climb up and back down, ending where you began, birth and death. What are the pillars, the camps, the life lessons that must be learned as you ascend? The 7 lessons one must master in order to leave life enlightened. The 7 characteristics. How about the fact that there are 7 chakras as well? Here's the tricky part. There are 2 sides to every lesson, yin and yang, for example. If as a child we are beaten and neglected, we learn not to trust people to love and care for us. This on one hand may make us self-sufficient and strong. After all, every betrayal we experience first begins with trust. However, it may also ruin the future relationships we have because of our fears. We make new people pay for past people's mistakes. We damage our relationships. As a preemptive defense against a hurt, we may never suffer, and so we cause our own suffering. In contrast, if we are surrounded with love and safety and nurturing by good people, we may be more likely to suffer from naivete, to be taken advantage of because we are too trusting. Where is the balance? So if camp 1 was trust, you must therefore have a lesson that shows the light and dark of it. Scaling will be one side of it, and returning will be the other side, 2 sides of the same coin. List your 7 personal virtues, mantras, characteristics, lessons. Do you have those yet?
No. That's
okay.
Right. That's where I wasn't sure where to begin because I wasn't quite sure what you meant.
Okay, so with each word, break down further into other mini lessons, stepping stones between the milestones. Consider them a path to each other, i.e. will trust lead to love? When we consider trust, where is the lesson in trusting people, trusting yourself, your tuition, and how to rebuild trust? Why does love require trust? Where does love lead? Love leads to family, friendships, bonds, selflessness, acceptance, forgiveness. What are the caverns, the dangers, the predators, the death traps, fear, anger, resentment, mistrust, judgment? Your ambition in level 23 is essentially to draw a map with the perils and path from the summit to the peak of the mountain. I'd say with your 7 camps, the beginning and ending being life and death, that you should plan on there being about 2 to 10 steps or obstacles between, i.e. between love and trust is forgiveness that allows for the rebuilding and return to trust. So the offense, selfishness, is a scorching sun on the east side of the mountain and rocks with no trees or shade. Forgiveness is the river that divides the 2 camps and rehydrates you for the rough climb up to love from broken trust. Do you get the idea? Apparently not, or we wouldn't be having this hangout. A drawing, a sketch, mixed media cutout, mostly with just the words and descriptors, passes you for level 23. Ask your apprentices to weigh in and help if you get stuck. That's okay. I don't mind that you came right to the master. So, okay. So what are you confused about?
I guess I'm not quite sure where to start to come up with the original list of 7, either virtues or mantras or characteristics.
So I would say that, well, one, let's talk about that at the beginning, because we put this up in August. So it's been quite a while. So are you still feeling like this map is suiting you?
Yes, because after this stage are where I start going and doing all, I've been calling them, or thinking of them as my minimus maximus images.
I know, I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, and I want to get to that, but I don't want to skip this level because I like to go in serial when it comes to this kind of stuff. I figure, especially when I'm trying to build the creative side, I think it's important, and I think it will help me when I start hunting for those. I mean, I can go stand in a field and say, yeah, there's a sunset there, and look, there's a small flower, and take a picture of both. But anybody can do that. And it's not something that's really going to stand out and put on a wall that somebody's going to look at and go, wow, I'm getting something more from that. Kind of like the image I did for the last scavenger hunt with Kelly's finger and my finger touching in the mirror. That I think has kind of a message that people bring to it. It can have all kinds of different stories if you want to spend the time out of it. And I think that's where this work will give me that. I mean, I still may end up standing in a field looking at a flower, but it might change my perspective on how I take the picture and what I'm trying to draw out of the environment I'm in to, build that story side of things. I've never been very good in the story aspect of pictures. I will get some, but I can't claim to say that I really envisioned the story as I took the picture. They kind of develop after the fact. So I'm kind of hoping this will help that prevision of story in addition to the pictures.
Are you a reader?
Oh, voracious reader.
Okay, so maybe you're more the opposite. So with the Reliquarium project that I'm working on, I do it in both ways, and it's been a marrying of both. Because I would say that I'm a writer equally, as evident by your spear map, as much as I identify with photography or art. So for this project, which is a book, there are certain images I have in my head that I have to build into the story and figure out how that becomes part of the plot. But there's also plenty of the story that comes together that I write it first and then see where they're visually interesting enough to fill in. And it's been interesting in this standpoint that once I have the rough draft and I look at it, things that are very, very important to the plot are not necessarily visually enticing, not something that I could build a single image around, and vice versa. I have these epic ideas in my mind for images that are very, very minuscule in terms of where they fall in the story. So if it isn't natural for you to take an image and then look at that image and create a story from the image, maybe you should take this story first and then figure out what the image of that would be. So for me, when I sit and I read, I start to put in my head what the characters look like and what the room they're talking about looks like, and I build that in my head. So this level might actually end up being really good for you. So I would say if we're talking about 7 camps, and I'm totally okay with you making it more or less depending on what you find. 7 is just a very sacred number, 7 days of the week. 7 chakras, 7 sins, 7 virtues, 7 virgins. So I would say to just start doing some research into other stories, other mythologies, maybe even other religions and like their rules. Like we have the 10 commandments for working through life. And it's really just about you going through, like you're pretty much at the summit. If the birth is one side of the mountain and death is the other, we're somewhere in the middle towards the top. It's all downhill from here kind of thing. So being at the top now, I would imagine whatever lessons you've learned, that those would be the important ones to start with, and then figure out what the other side of that is. So the image that you did for the scavenger hunt, with your finger touching someone else's through the mirror kind of thing, that could very easily be 2 sides of the coin and an image that would translate that and be interesting. So
Okay.
I would say whatever you decide are the 7 things that you're meant to learn. You know, if that was the question to get into heaven or whatever afterlife there is, or that was the question you had to answer before you could be reincarnated, or that, you know, like that's the thing that you come into question with, and they say, what are the 7 things that you found were most important to learn? What would those be? And if it's not, if you're
Okay.
not a writer and it doesn't come in easily where you can sit and write pages of that, then I would break it down into a word. And maybe you sit with a piece of paper and you end up with 60 words. Like, these things are important: love and family and money, because people always seem ashamed to say money, even though it takes up so much of our life. And then you break that down and go, okay, well, money itself isn't important because it's a piece of paper. You can't eat it, you can't grow it, you can't find shelter under it. So why is money important? Because money buys experiences and protects our loved ones. And, you know, so breaking them out and branching them out. But I think if you sit and just put a pen to paper, that you'll start finding it. And if you get really, really stuck, then ask people that you admire their opinions and their viewpoints on life. Go to your, you know, go to parents or grandparents, or, you know, the neighbor down the street, or another teacher or mentor, or put it out on your social media and ask people, if you had to name the 7 most important qualities in a good person, what would they be? Or the 7 worst qualities in a person, or the 7 most important lessons. And, you know, you can absolutely gather from other people and see what they come up with. The ones that resonate with you, even if they're not just your idea, are the things that are touching heartstrings inside, and they'll lead you to your ideas, I think.
Okay, yeah, actually, the last sentence really resonated because I was trying to look at it from just my perspective, but I think it's probably more important to look at it from others. I mean, I'm not going to buy my own pictures to begin with, but I can also then draw from that. Okay, and actually, I'm just thinking now. I can write. I'm not an author by any stretch, much as I would have loved to be able to
Yes.
write a book. It's funny. I've always wanted to write a book. My favorite genre is fantasy.
Okay.
And I tend to read to I read things that have absolutely no real grounding in the rest of my life because it's my escape. Like, I won't read technical drama stuff, anything that I can really put my own experience into, because it is an escape. But I've always wanted to be able to read a book. My problem is I've read so many books that if I start doing something, I can't help but pick from other stuff, and then I'm not coming up with my own idea. I think if I was to write a book, I'd have to stop reading for a year.
I think it's like anything else. I mean, I think photographers see other work that they're moved by, and create, but you put your own twist on it. So I think it's the same for writing. Like, I do that all the time with writing. I make my husband crazy. We can't go to the movies together anymore because I have the Notebook app. And when I hear great quotes or conversation or things, I write them down because they make me think of something else. And then, you know, I'll cite where I got them from, and then I'll take it and feed it into the conversation. And, you know, like, I'm one of the really strange ones, the things I do, a lot of my quotes come from mishearing quotes of other people, especially in songs and stuff. Like, you ever sing the song and you're like, oh, that's not the lyrics. What I was singing was totally wrong. I do that all the time, but I like what I hear.
Yeah.
And so they end up being original quotes because apparently I can't understand music. You know, but I don't think it's bad as long as you're not plagiarizing. I mean, really, there are no original ideas. You know, if you give me any movie, I can come up with 5 other movies that basically follow the same plot.
Yes.
You know, one of them takes place in, you know, the Wild West, and one of them takes place in a future country. But the basic idea is that there's a love triangle, and depending on who she chooses, the world collapses, you know, or the city collapses. And, you know, like, they really are. It's really, really hard to find really original concepts anymore in anything. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. And, you know, for me, the idea is, as soon as somebody goes, oh, this reminds me of this image, or this reminds me of that story, that's when I know that I'm too close to something else. And sometimes I don't even think of them when I'm writing it or when I'm creating it, but they influence your work and get stuck in your subconscious. But I think our whole perspective is made out of that. So I wouldn't worry about it. I do think that this whole sphere would make for a very interesting book, which may have been what I was pushing you to in the first place.
Well, I don't know if I would write a book, but okay, that gives me a better idea. Is that just jotting words on the page of thinking back to the level just before that, and my page that I did keep, it's here somewhere, somewhere, with all the words that were put on it. And that was an interesting exercise because I built that. I use an application called OneNote at work, which I never used before getting to the place I work now. And I always have it open on my desktop, or my laptop, I should say. So it's always handy. It's also on all my mobiles. So for me, it's a really good all-around notebook that follows me. And what I would do is, as I came across different words, I just stick them in there.
Okay.
And I ended up, I think, with well over 100 words. And then I started going through them to clean it up for the level. And I had duplicate words, duplicate concepts, because I didn't pay attention. I just put the word in, and then I figured I'll come back to it later. So it was interesting to see how some of the words came up a lot. Then it's repetitive concepts. And then there were some that they weren't, they really didn't apply, but I kind of like the word. So I've actually put them onto another spot to come back to, and I don't know what I'll do with them. But I think if I follow that same process for this, I think that'll get me started, because the yin and yang I absolutely get. I can certainly pull from my last several years for some of the things that I've learned about myself and about life, in some cases relearned. And yeah, I think that should get me going where I want it to go.
I think if you do that you'll find yourself at least kick-started into it, and then some of the words will feed into other words. So Sandra had the same problem when she was starting Infectus as the book. And so did Sally, actually, when she was doing hers and thinking about what words she was going to do. She had a lot of things that were basically synonyms. Or slight variations. So, if you write down love and you write down affection and you write down fondness, they can all essentially be the same thing. But depending on where you go to, you could feed into lust, and romance, which is a totally different kind of love, as opposed to, parental or sibling.
Friendship.
Yeah. So I think you'll be able to start grouping them and then find the central words that those are spider webbing out from, which will probably end up being the basis for the 7. And then those connecting words, like if we were going to do love and lust, or friendship and lust as two of the main ones, then you could follow that from friendship to affection to romance, and so those will become the stepping stones in between them. And then you have the very interesting task, because you're kind of limited into landscape and macro work. So, if I tell any photographer, okay, the challenge of the week is go find romance, I'm going to get a lot of pictures of couples and maybe flowers or candles or things that are cliches. However, trying to walk into the middle of the field with your camera and find romance is going to be a little bit different, or love for that matter, or forgiveness. Like, how do you translate that into natural elements, which I think is going to be really, it's really challenging. I think you have one of the hardest spheres that I wrote, but I expect a lot from you. So
I actually like that, because I'll go back to the scavenger hunt. So there's, as you know, there's 10 images or 10 words that you have to pick and find images for. I only did 5. I had a couple of ideas for other ones, but the thing that I found, and now that they're doing the reveals, and proving me exactly what I was expecting to see, I didn't want to adopt, like you said, love. Find me pictures of love. There's going to be flowers, there'll be hearts, there'll be couples kissing, there'll be babies. All those typical things are the first thing that people go to, which you can have wonderful pictures. But to me, they're not creative. They're not looking at it and going, how can I twist this around to look at it from a different angle where somebody goes, holy crap, I never even thought of that. And for me, when I start looking at some of the reveals, one of them was oval. And my idea was an egg, which is a typical one, but what I wanted to do with it was anything but typical. But there's dozens of eggs in the picture,
Yeah.
in the pictures that were put in there. So, and some of them are very creative. Some of them I've seen 50 different variations of. And then there was a couple where people actually went out and used their vision to see. There was a beautiful picture taken of an arch, the kind of picture you would expect to see at a wedding. And it was cattails and things like that down in the water below, and just a hint of the arch reflected in the water. So you didn't have the perfect oval, but your brain filled the rest in.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's a good picture. And that's the kind of thing that makes you looked at it and gone, I see the theme in it, but you have to pay attention to it. And I think that's the same kind of thing, like for me to go out into, again, to a field with a flower and stuff like that, to try and find romance. I can think of a couple of different ways to do it that isn't central to the flower itself.
Mm.
And that's where I find the images that are like that are the ones that I find are the most powerful. They're the ones that really get people to look at. Like the image that I did with the mirror with myself and Kelly. I had a bunch of different ideas in mind for it. That actually was against crimson, so just she painted the one fingernail. But it really, it can symbolize life and death. It can symbolize, lasting romance that transcends barriers and worlds and things like that. It can show you two sides of a reality, because in the image, one person's in the mirror. Well, which side is the real side?
Right.
Kind of like the Matrix. You sit there thinking you're in a world, but you're really in your own mind. That's the kind of stuff that I really like, and I find that's one thing I say about macros, because it's not, you're not stuck taking a picture of anything other than the fact you're very close. So you can do a lot of stuff with that. And then the landscape, well, it's easy to play things into a landscape. A landscape doesn't have to be an entire mountainside. You can do a landscape that is your front lawn, depending on your angle. So that's what I like about. I've liked about the whole map, but I didn't want to change anything in the map, but I still don't, because I like the way it makes me think, and that's why I wanted to have this one, because I got stuck on it, and I think where I got stuck was I was trying to come up with my own journey, and that's not the right way to go about it. I think it should be a journey or multiple journeys that people can take.
Well, and I think I think that bleeds into a good part of it. If we're trying to come up with the seven pinnacles or milestones that you reach in life, and we're trying to define them as single words, I think it's the kind of thing that something open-ended like love would probably be listed by everybody you asked. What is one of 7 things that you have to have in life? Love would be up there. But it's interesting because, if you asked me who I have loved most in my life, my kids, my husband, my grandmother, there's different things. So while everyone might not find their soulmate in terms of their romantic partner and stay married 50 years, or while everyone might not have children, and my father-in-law, the love of his life was his dog. Very much so. So it's not even like limited to a species. And for others, love might be a really negative thing. Maybe they fell madly in love when they were younger and never got over it and never loved anybody else and spent the rest of their life unrequited. It might be a very negative thing, So I think it's still a central thing that everybody in their life would tell you about love and about the importance of it and how it changed them, even though their experiences are very different, and so I think that's what you're looking for, is 7 things everybody experiences before they die. Love would definitely be one, and I think loss would definitely be one. And it may not be the word love that you fall into. Maybe it has to do with relationships or connection or selflessness, which are all different sides and variations of that. So I think that might be a better question for you, is what are the 7 things every being experiences before death?
Yeah, I can do
And
that. And I've got I'm just thinking now of where I can go for it. I've got a very wide, somewhat eclectic collection of people on my Facebook
mhm,
now. That would be a place to see what I got out of that. So some of them are people that I grew up with. In some cases, I've known since I was 4. In other cases, new people that have come along. A few of them I've never actually met in person. We just kind of clicked, which is kind of cool. And they've got such a wide variety of tastes. Like I've got my best friend lives in Orlando. Sorry, Kissimmee, and he works for Disney. He's one of the boat captains.
right.
Um, and I don't think I would want to put him and Caleb in the same room because they have totally divergent views on just about everything.
Right.
Although they would have one hell of a discussion because
Right.
they're both they're very intellectually based.
That's
So
exactly what I would do. I would look for people that are very different because the thing that they agree on would be one of the foundation things. And I would look for people that are in different walks of life. Like if you ask someone that's 85 or 92 what the 7 most important things they experienced were, and you ask someone who's 4 or 7, and see
yeah,
what comes across universally as the most important things. Like, what makes a good person? Asking 4 to 10 year olds is going to yield some very fun results. I guarantee it.
oh, absolutely.
And it's little things like, my son just brought home a thing for Father's Day, and it was like 10 things he's thankful for. And it was everything from you give me good hugs and you make me laugh to you buy me push pops every time we go to Home Depot. Like those, and it's such like a wide array, but like I really genuinely think that every time that kid sees a push pop when he's in his 30s and 40s and 50s, he will think of his dad. And when his dad isn't here, he'll be standing in line at Home Depot with his kid and he will buy our grandchild a push pop because that's what his dad did, because that was his favorite candy when he was little. Like, those are the little things that we start to attach very, very intense emotional things to. Like, it's hardened sugar and food coloring. Let's just put it in there. It is not
Yeah.
some great act of love that we put that into our children's bodies to ingest, but my son will equate that with love. So when you start looking at those things, and I think the other thing is, like, when you start to ask those questions, everybody gears towards the good side. Like, what are the 7 most important things? And we'll talk about love, and we'll talk about honesty, and we'll talk about integrity of character and strength and bravery and like good qualities. But what about fear? Fear probably has the most profound impact on most people's lives. I would say as much, if not more, than love. People do things and don't do things because they're scared all the time. They don't talk to someone that they need to talk to. They don't ask, for the raise at work, which ends up being why they can't make ends meet, which ends up being why they have marital problems and their spouse leaves. Like, fear can absolutely push you beyond. A lot of people spend a lot of their lives working in a job that they do make enough money because they're so afraid of not making enough money that they waste their life away until they're 65, hoping to God that they're going to be able to do what they want when they're too old to be able to really appreciate it or have the bodies for it to go scale those mountains in the first place. So, that would absolutely be another one, but we tend to shy away from fear and what that would look like, and I bet you could find some really great symbolism and variations visually on what fear looks like in the middle of the field or a mountain.
Oh yeah, you mentioned money, and everybody wants money. No, I shouldn't say everybody. Most people want money. There's some that don't care. I actually had a guy that worked for me, care less, and super super nice guy, gifted in what he did for me. Very spiritual, not religious, spiritual, and money really had no meaning to him. He needed some to pay for his bills, but that was about it. For most people, like you mentioned, somebody staying in a job that they don't like, but they make enough money, they're afraid to move. It all comes down to survivability. And when you remove that, so if you have enough money, then all of a sudden it's tremendously freeing because you're not afraid anymore. You don't have to worry about losing your house and things like that.
Yep.
I mean, we've come very close twice to losing pretty much everything. And it does change you, and it can change you in a bad way. I think in our case, it certainly changed us in a very positive way. Taught us that, if we have to sell our house, we're still going to survive. The house isn't what we need to survive. We can do anything. We can go anywhere, do pretty much anything. We're not tied to this spot. And a lot of people get tied into that. But I think things like that are experiences that are common for most people, and certainly would be able to pull out. And then I can look for the unusual in that.
Attachment might be a good one for you too, then.
Yes. Because there's so many different flavors of that.
And severing ties, because people get attached to all kinds of things, vices and houses and materialism, people. There's a lot of people that call attachment love.
Yeah.
And misconstrue them. But I think that is the gist of this level for you, is really doing some soul searching, and not necessarily just your own soul, but to figure out what the common threads are. If everybody walks their own path, what are the things they need to scale it? There's more than one way up the mountain. You can go up all the way around 360 degrees around the summit. But what are the places that you're going to hit? And what are the 7 things you need to reach it to the top?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. That was the place I was getting stuck. And I think that makes it easier. And certainly I can keep jotting this stuff down. I know when we sat down the first time and you mapped this out, I said I'm not a speed demon when it comes to this, because I wanted to take my time on it. I found the first 20 levels were difficult to transition through. They were very, they're designed to be cut and dried. They are designed to be, I think they're designed to be more technical than they are creative, but I know some of it's driven by the master who chooses you and brings you in.
Yeah.
But even so, even like some of the master's challenges I looked at, they don't have this kind of aspect to them, where you're really kind of challenging yourself to enhance your artistry. There's a lot of skills that's being built. There's everything from learning vision to visualization to the basics of photography. Actually, I'll take basics of photography out because I haven't seen that being taught. I don't know, maybe that's by design. But there's nothing that really fits this. So I didn't find that going through the first 20 levels was terribly challenging. It was very rewarding. I learned a hell of a lot. Certainly the image that I created for Viewbug, my spring, I couldn't have done the same kind of job of that prior to going through all the stuff that Don taught me.
Right.
Because there's a lot of finishing work in there, which is very finely done stuff that I could have had the picture, and the picture would have looked okay, but it wouldn't have had the same kind of impact and attention to the pieces that everybody seems to really like in that picture, because I wasn't aware of it or how to bring it forward. So those are good. But this one, I wanted to make sure I took my time to really develop and pull the most out of it, which I think is also why I got stuck here, because I didn't want to just gloss through it, because I could. It'd be really easy to pull out 7 things and find their opposites. Done.
Yep.
But I don't get anything out of that. And that's not going to help me with the following levels when I start building a different portfolio than I have today.
There's my father always says, you don't scale the mountain so people see you at the top. You scale the mountain to see from the top. And and I think at least for me, running a foundation level, the foundation levels were to kind of gauge skill and talent and knowledge in the base, from the standpoint of the masters looking at you guys, and to help build consistency in your portfolio, and to really just give you time to adjust to the climate and kind of get the flow of the Arcanum, because it's a very different teaching model than anything else that I've done, and learning model. And I think a lot of people, like, that's been something that we've had a hard time translating in marketing and stuff, because I don't think you get it until you're in it. Like, I think a lot of people think the Arcanum is like Linda or Kelby training or Creative Live. Like, they don't get the community or the mentoring, which is totally different than teaching. And honestly, we've had a lot of masters that have come in to teach that have ended up leaving because they didn't realize how much time and energy they have to actually put into these. Like, it takes me like weeks to write all of your Spiritus. You guys know, because you were sitting and waiting for them.
Yeah, no, it is a very different model, and it's. I remember when I first read about it, the first thing I thought of what I got from the initial blurb on it. I think it wasn't even Trey. It was somebody else had posted about it, and I thought, here's an opportunity to learn from somebody else that's not in a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and I did take a photography course years ago, and I remember it was in film. We did some black and white darkroom stuff, which was kind of fun. Those pictures that you thought my wine glass was horrible, those are horrible. And I remember leaving the class, I could develop pictures, I could go out and snap pictures with my X700. Didn't understand the first bit how to pick the right aperture or even what it did for me.
Yep.
And that was a college level class that was supposed to explain those things. I can explain that to a non-photographer in about 2 minutes.
Yep.
And I don't even have to have a picture. I got a picture, it's even faster. Yet they couldn't teach it to me. And usually I learn pretty well. So it kind of stepped me away from it. The fact that you had to pay for the film and develop it also didn't help much. So when I looked at this, at the Arcanum, I looked at the model it was putting forward. It wasn't to teach me that particular thing. You're expected to have a certain level of knowledge. Hence, you would be selected by a master. If you don't have the knowledge, you're not going to be necessarily selected. But to get their insights on how to do things. And I remember when I received the email from Dawn, we were away on vacation. I just about fell out of my chair because I'd already been following Dawn. I tried to do a snowflake picture. I did a picture of a snowflake. Thought, this is awesome. Not as good as his, but I was blown away with it. And here along comes this guy, and he says, "Yeah, I'd like to mentor you." And you could have knocked me over with a feather. It just blew me away. I couldn't wait to get in there. And I got in there, and it was his first cohort, and there were various levels of skill. So you would put your introductory picture up, and right away I could see where people were in terms of their vision, in terms of how they take a picture and what they take pictures of. And I thought, this is kind of interesting. Then I noticed that as people were going through levels, they were all picking more or less the same things, and they were picking things that were in line with Dawn's cohort, which I think is a natural thing to do. I can't remember what level it is, but you're supposed to go out and you're supposed to post, I think it's 3 or 5 critiques from other masters, and everybody was picking macros because he's primarily a macro cohort.
Right.
I went looking for everything that was outside of anything I'd ever shot, and I watched a bunch of yours, and yours was one of yours was what I posted, and it was of a portrait, somebody who had done a whole series of portraits, which at that point in time I had never done. I didn't know anything about lighting. I didn't know anything about posing. Still don't. I actually have a posing app, which kind of helped, but not really. But I thought, here's an opportunity where I can look at it and say, okay, so what do I take away from a portrait photographer that will help me with mine? Okay, so understand lighting. In macro work, lighting is very important, but it's extremely difficult because you have such a small space to put light into.
Yeah.
And you use much higher light values than you do when you're doing a portrait. If I use comparative one, I'd have somebody with a 20 million candle power spotlight on them. They're going to look horrible.
Right.
But a bug looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was neat for doing that. So I put those up, and it kind of threw people off. They started looking at other things. It's like, well, yeah, it's okay to look at other photographers and see what they do, because you can learn. And as a result of that, I ended up doing some portrait work. It's not great portrait work. The person was happy with it. It's not something that I would take on as a business, because it's fun, but it's not really where my bag is, I guess.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to see the number of people that went through that went in looking for a college level type thing where, do this, as opposed to, okay, I'm trying to do this. How would you approach it? Or, what would I do differently? To the point that when I got to my level 19 critique, the final one, there have been 2 people ahead of me, and they put their best images up, and they were beautiful images. I put my 5 worst that I had selected at that time. And when we sat down, I said, I picked these because I want to know what I could do to approach them differently to either realize the vision or improve on them. I don't know if anybody else has ever done that, but I got so much more out of that critique than I think I would if I put the top 5 from that particular level.
I wish everybody in the Arcanum and the world watches this video and hears that, because so many people bring their best images to critique to show and demonstrate their skill and their value and their natural talent, which is excellent. Like, it helps us to see where you are, but you learn so much more from failure than you do from success. Like, a good image is a good image, but if you come in with a perfect image and I don't have any critique to offer you because it's spot on, then why bring it to critique? Bring that one to the gallery, you know, bring it to the expo when you're in competition for it, absolutely, but don't bring it to critique. Bring me the ones that you messed up on and you can't figure out why it doesn't work. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Like I had a golf ball that I put on a tee, and it's a cliche-ish type of picture, but I had kind of did it black and white, blurred out the background, and so tried to change it up a little bit. And it wasn't a bad picture. It's not a wonderful picture. And in the critique, Dawn and I were going back and forth to try and figure out, okay, how can we change this up to add a story to it, or take it away from the typical golf ball and a tee. And I'm actually going to go back and redo it at some point. I've got a little notebook that I keep all these things in. And it's, you know, simple things like adding a golf club and maybe the toe of the golfer's shoe and an ant. You know, instantly there's a story there. You know, the ant doesn't know it's coming, and the person who's going to hit the ball doesn't care that there's an ant on it, or maybe they do care.
Hasn't even noticed.
Yeah, exactly. And it would be one of those images that would catch people. And if I add some water into it, which is one of my favorite subjects, then you get some of that kind of sparkle. Well, not sparkle's not the right word, but you know, a little bit more something to the image.
That's what it is. You know, that's the life force of it. That's the soul of the work then, are those little elements. And I think that that's really the strength of macro and what I'm looking for from you, because I have stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon, and I have, you know, stood at these places that are landmarks and destination points and marveled at grandeur. But meanwhile, there's all of these really amazing things going on in a world that's mostly unnoticed and sometimes unseen, to the point that Sigma just sent me a macro lens because I went out shooting with Alan Shapiro, you know, and he takes beautiful flower photos, and that's his specialty. Like, almost exclusively his macro work is flowers, which is beautiful and fun, and I had a great time shooting it. And I went around this evening before I got on the call with you, actually, and just went out for a couple of minutes and played with it. Totally foreign genre to me. By the way, I cannot handhold in macro, but I'm learning. But there was a flower that had lost all its petals, and it's got, like, you know, 15, 20 little stamens. Actually, I'm not even sure anybody else would call it a flower. I'm going with it's a weed. And even though I was looking right at it and went, ooh, that's interesting texture, I bet you that'll make a good shot with all of my novice, you know, one day's experience as macro photographer. When I zoomed in, there was a little bug on top of it. And even though I was looking right at it going, okay, I'm going to take a picture, it wasn't until I got in and put the zoom on that I noticed it, looking right at it. And then same thing, I found another flower, and then, you know, there was a perfect one, and there was one that got eaten by whatever's eating things in my garden. But in the center of the broken one, there was one drop of water that was perfectly balanced on the stamen of the flower. You know, so, and you know, things that I would never, ever, ever notice without having that in. So, you know, it makes it interesting to me. Like, I now know that there's ants inside all those flowers, and to not bring them in my house, which I've done in the past. But, you know, like, I couldn't help looking at this bushel of flowers all in, and this entire ant colony, and seeing the similarities between, say, New York City.
Yeah.
You know, when you're taking, like, Google images, it probably looks an awful lot like an ant colony from above. And so I think that those are some of the things that you can play with while you're doing it, because you have access to a world that a very small amount of people have. And we like to say, like, everybody's a photographer, and we've become very visual creatures, but there's a very small subset that really get into it. even though it feels like everyone is, we're still a very small subset of the world, and the population. And then there's a much, much smaller subset that's involved in macro or in landscape or in these things. And you guys see things differently. Like, and until I do it, until I go into a different genre, I don't realize exactly how different you have to think and feel and perceive and, you know, take into consideration. So I think that's going to really be the strength of this series for you, is having the grandeur and then having, you know, these really important details that are being overlooked while you're marveling at the grandeur, you know?
And that's the thing that I love about macro. You know, there's the obvious, again, the obvious macro picture. Somebody goes and finds a bug and takes a picture. Why? Because they're small, they're everywhere, and it is challenging to an extent. But there's so many things to take macro pictures of. I mean, I can come up with all kinds of different ways to take pictures of water that's still macro. And they don't have to be the typical water drop where somebody's, you know, dropped $500 or $600 on a machine to time it. I refuse to do that. You know, if I'm going to get one of those pictures, it'll be the old-fashioned way, holding a water dropper and racking off about 2,000 pictures, and one works.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do keep in my bag. When I go out, I've got I have 3 lenses that normally go in my bag when I go out. One is my 70-200. I've got a 24-105, and my 100mm macro. And right in beside it is a refilled bug spray bottle made by Off. All that stuff is gone, but it's filled with water. So then when I get to things, I can add water. And water drops added to everything just change an image. So if you see, like you see Don's images, and they got all these wonderful water drops and everything else, yet he didn't get up at 5 in the morning and go out for the dew. He's not even awake at 5 o'clock. I think he gets up at 10.
Him and I get along just fine.
Yeah, but he has a spray bottle, and he soaks the hell out of whatever it is he wants to take a picture of. Drops eventually form and they'll stick. And now if you get up early in the morning and get something to do, that's where you get really beautiful spider webs with all the tiny jewels on them. They don't seem to work quite as well with a mister, but it's in my bag at all times. We have in Ottawa every year, we get from the Netherlands, I'm going to say millions of tulips. And it's a thank you from World War II, because we sheltered the Queen of Denmark, I think. And so we have a tulip festival. So, oh, you're looking for the cat?
Sorry.
Oh,
I'm just letting it by the door. I need him. Hi, Jess. How are you?
Good. How are you?
She says, good. How are you?
I'm depressed, actually.
Oh, she's depressed. That's my daughter's cat she just stole.
Oh.
So, but in springtime, they have the tulip festival, and the place is covered in tulips. This year, they even had one that was engineered for our upcoming 150th anniversary of the country, and it's a red and white tulip, Canada's colors. So I went out and I got close to where I work. They had all these tulip beds, and there's photographers standing there taking pictures this way, and a few people kneel down and take a close-up picture of whatever. And there's me lying on my stomach with a water bottle, misting the hell out of one that's got petals kind of falling off of it. And one photographer, guy with the camera maybe, he came over and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm taking a picture of the tulip." He said, "Yeah, but you're getting it wet." Yeah. So then I started showing him some of the pictures, and they're unprocessed. They're even close to what they would be when they were done. And he's like, "How did you see that?" Just look.
Just look.
Like, stop.
Just look. There's the name of the book.
Yeah, it could be. But that's the thing is, like when I was doing my 365, I would go out and sit and look at the garden and just kind of look at everything that's going on in it. And I would all of a sudden start noticing details. And then I'd pay attention to detail, and not all of them were of any use. Some of them were still very boring, but they would lead to other things. And then you would start seeing color contrasts and textures. And then you get surprises. Like I took a picture of, and this was a bug. It was a spider that was hiding in the marigold. Same color. And he just kind of stood out. Ugly, ugly spider. And when I took the picture and brought it up on my screen, yeah, it wasn't, I don't mind them, but they're not my favorite either. I didn't realize that the texture on a petal of a marigold is just like all those little magic finger mattresses. It's covered in little bumps.
Yeah.
I had no idea until I'm looking, going, holy crap, I didn't even know that was there. But it really makes the picture look neat. It looks like he's perched on this bed, and with these beautiful textures and colors. And I wouldn't have gotten that if I hadn't been looking very closely at stuff that's very, very small.
So maybe you should shift your thinking, and instead of the 7 things that everyone agrees on, you know how they say, if I knew then what I know now, maybe it's the 7 things that you'll realize are important once you're on the other side of the mountain. Maybe it's the things everybody overlooks. Maybe it is like the push pops and the little things. You know, it'd be interesting to have a collection of things that everybody, you know, what's the smallest act of love that you get? You know, like Mackenzie works for my studio. Her dad every morning makes her a cup of tea, and her sister, and leaves it on their nightstands before their alarms go off. So they wake up with a cup of tea. You know, like it's little things like that. So I think that it would be really interesting to see the just look kind of idea where it was all these things, which is also interesting because I'm always looking at ways to monetize and market while you're creating, because I think the art makes the argument for you. Anytime that you have the ability to have other people engage in what you're doing, that's when you start really building the following. So if you were doing a project where you were posting on your social media, what makes you feel loved, or what's the one little act of love somebody does for you, you know, people will start sharing photos with your hashtag of just look, you know, and you could have a whole slew of things. And one of those things, someone will post something that'll give you an idea, and you'll go, oh, absolutely. You know what would say that? A rock, you know, because it's still, it's very different. You're pushing twice as hard, because it's not like you were talking about the oval and the fact that somebody saw an oval in the reflection of the water and the arch, you know, but it's still an oval. You're still looking for a shape. It's still something visual. You can't visualize emotions. You have other things that symbolize them. But like my dad asked me that, he's always challenging me, and he said, how do you photograph the wind? You can feel it. You know, and you know, immediately I'm like, well, I guess we could like pick up some of the dried leaves and hold them and let them go so you could see things moving through. And he's like, but those are the leaves, it's not the wind, you know. And essentially that's what I'm asking you to do. How do you take these intangible, invisible things that you feel and give them visual interpretation? And then how do you do that in macro? Like the picture I love with the 3 water droplets, that you did, like what emotion is that, and how does that convey, you know? Because it's the kind of thing that, like, we love the idea of thinking outside the box, and like you said, you don't want to create images that everybody has. So if we say love, you don't want pictures of people kissing, or flowers and candles for romance, or candlelit dinners and that stuff, or, you know, heart boxes of chocolates. Like those are cliche things that everybody's going to think of. But you also don't want to take a picture of something so far out there that everybody's like, what? You know, it's got to be the kind of thing that everybody can connect to. So like if we were looking for love and you just happened to be out doing a walk and you found 2 mushrooms that were leaning into each other, you know, and almost touching, like that's the kind of thing that everybody could still make the connection, because we've personified them now and made them a couple reaching towards each other. You know, does that work? Yes, it does. However, if you take a picture of like a rock in the middle of the river, you know, it's not the kind of thing that everyone will say. So it's almost like those ink blots where it's like, tell me what you see here kind of thing. But you want to get, I would say, at least 70%. So if you're going through and you're finding these things, and then you have your 7 things and your stepping stones in between, and you start looking at how to portray them, I would say pick 1 or 2, look outside the box and put it together, but then post it up and say, if you had to assign an emotion or a characteristic, or however you want to define it, if you decide those 7 things are emotions, and their love and their fear and their courage, or whatever you decide them to be, I would post it up and say, if this was represented in emotion, what would it be? If you're not hitting at least 70%, you missed the mark on it.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that.
It's got to convey, you know?
Yeah, I like that, because the other thing I want to have is, I don't want to get an image to the point that everybody sees and gets exactly the same thing from it.
Yeah.
I want to have the kind of thing that where somebody looks at it, and, you get the general gist, but it says something different to each person, and even better if it says something different every time they look at it, which is even harder to get to. But things like the mushrooms meeting together, there's an obvious symbolism there, but there's all kinds of other stories that could exist around it. The mushrooms are in the dark. They're loved but unloved. There's all kinds of different things in there. Okay, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that appeals to me.
Yeah, I think that's the way you should go. And then it's really up to you. You're an avid reader. You like to write, but you don't consider yourself a writer or an author. But at the same time, if you look at Sandra with Adfectus, with her book, I'm not sure that all of her images would translate the way she wants them to if they were just the images. But they absolutely do, because she's got that one line or that one quote underneath each of them, and then it leads the mind into looking into that image for that thing. So they can still get different things from it, because we always see through our own perspective and our own life experiences. But it kind of gives entry into it, like you pre-design the mind to be looking for those things. So you have to decide if you want the images to be 1,000 words all by themselves, or if you want to make it 1,001 and add a word or a paragraph, because these could be easily blog posts, status updates and stuff for social media, and also a book. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that is good. That's what I was hoping to. That's the kind of, I guess, direction I was looking for, to be able to recapture where to go. Okay. No, I don't feel like I'm stuck anymore.
Good.
So that's good.
Good. Okay. Go forth. Find things. Level up. Is there anything else that I can help you with?
Nope. That was good. That's exactly what I needed.
Good. I'm excited. Post some stuff.
I will. Now I can start. Well, I had fun doing the scavenger hunt, the pieces that I did do, but it's been killing me because I haven't been able to post any of the pictures. And I really like the ones that I did do. Now I can start posting.
Is that officially done now? Share them all?
The 7th image went up today. It's funny. The very first category was Shaggy, and so that was one of the ones I did. And then the next 5 were all the categories I didn't do. So for 5 days, I'm like, oh, come on. And today was architecture, so the rest of them I've done.
Nice.
But it was interesting. So for Shaggy, again, first things that popped in my head were fuzzy animals, people with shaggy hair, all these different things. And sure enough, there's lots of dogs, and then there's cows and muskox and stuff like that. Mine was moss.
Oh, I like it.
And I have these little things there. I don't know if you've ever seen them or not. If you can make it what it is. They're called water gems. You can get them at Michael's.
Okay.
And they are, I'll probably drop it.
Yeah, they're the little beads. You add the water and they swell up.
Yeah. The small ones are the same. They're actually exactly the same as water, so you can't really see them very easily in water. I can't, because I'm getting the right angle. But I put one of those on the moss. And then I took the picture. And when you get really close with a macro, small spheres like that act as a lens.
Can we see it? Do you have it on your computer? Can you screen share?
Yes, I do. I gotta go find it. Nobody knew what it was. And it's amazing the number of people that looked at it and thought that it was a reflection on a marble or something, when it's actually what was showing in the sphere was what was behind it.
Okay.
Let's see. One of these days I'll actually put these into a spot where it makes sense.
I say that all the time, but I don't.
Okay, so now I gotta remember how to screen share this.
Top of the screen.
There it is. QA, nope. Showcase, screen share. There we go. Do you see that?
Yes. That's awesome.
So what it is, it's the moss underneath. I don't know if you can see my mouse or not.
Mm-hmm.
These are all crystals of ice and snow that were melting. So when I took
Okay.
this, I was actually lying in the snow, and this was parts that had started to melt. It was taken in the start of March. These things here are all the little new growth that comes up from moss, and they usually will sprout and put seeds out, and you get more moss.
Okay.
This is the water gem that I was holding up. So it's very tiny. It's about the size of my fingernail. And upside down, this is the moss it's sitting on. There are those little stamens that are here. And this is the trees in behind it with the sun.
Nice.
And what I wanted the sunburst. So this is a fairly high, I think I was using 11 or 14 as my f-stop. But I also wanted the corresponding one up here. And I had to fight to get down low enough to be able to do it. And the problem I faced was I couldn't get the camera any lower. So I actually had to move it till I found a hump in the moss to get the angle, because otherwise it just couldn't get that balance.
Right.
But that was my entry for Shaggy.
I like it. And
so many people commented on the water gem. And when I told them what it was, now I've got people going out looking for them, trying to buy them. One person even said, I had 2 of these and I didn't know what the hell to do with them. Now I got to go back and play. And for me, that was probably the most rewarding thing is all these people looked at it, liked the image, no clue what it was.
Yep.
But wanted to know. And that's where that's the kind of image when I take it that I get the most reward out of.
It's interesting because it's like a reflection of the whole world. You can do, an entire series just with those in different places too, which I think would be really interesting.
I plan on it. I actually have a crystal ball, a big one, actually bigger than I intended because it's actually too heavy to really carry around too much. But that was what I had thought about doing, is taking, just landscape images, things like that, shot through it, which a lot of people do, but they're things that I like. And I was trying to think of, okay, how could I do this would be more in line with the pictures that I like to take. And I've come back to water drops and these water gems.
Well, then maybe you're not scaling a mountain. Maybe you're crossing a sea.
Huh? You lost me.
I said, well, instead of, scaling the mountain and going to the summit and back down, if water is your thing, then maybe there should be an element of water in all these images.
I would think so. I know there's something about water that I like.
Well, water is, 80% of the world and 70% of our bodies, and the one thing that every creature that's alive needs. I would say that that's a good place for a life source to begin. Maybe water is one of your 7.
Yeah, you can't live without it.
Yeah.
I could do it with 8 cups a day, but
good.
How do I turn this off?
There should be a thing up top that says stop screen share. If you just go up and click, there you go.
I found it. I'm out of practice.
All right. So how are you feeling now? Are you feeling inspired? Or are you feeling like, well, I can move forward, but I still don't know where I'm going?
No. Now I've got a direction. I've got tactics to use to get there, which is one big piece I was missing.
Okay.
And I was missing the tactics, and I had too narrow a focus. I got stuck on one particular sentence, I think. Okay. And I think now I've got a much broader sense of how to tackle it. I can see this one turning into that 100 words again that I've now got to pare back down to the 7.
Yeah. I
think
your apprentices will have some good feedback too if you feel stuck. This is a good one to put a post in the community and let everybody throw into. Maybe it'll inspire them too.
I will definitely do that. So. Okay. No, that's good. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. I'll talk to you soon then. I have another critique now. All right. Bye, Bruce.